Hello, everybody. This is Charles Alvarez, CEO of Cornerstone Growth Solutions. Welcome to another podcast. Today, we are joined by Troy Smith. Troy works for a very quick and fast-growing SaaS company, and he's got some great insights on what to do and what not to do on a successful SaaS implementation. He's obviously going to talk to us also about his SaaS product and um, how he applies it and what situations and use cases are best to apply his technology. So, Troy, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Charles. Looking forward to the discussion.
Cool. So tell me a little bit about how you got here. Like, tell me about your background, how you got into the SaaS world. Did you lose a bet or like what happened?
Yeah, I kind of stumbled into SaaS, not necessarily by accident, but I was on the client side of the business. I was working for Citibank at the time, and it was during that 2006, 2007 kind of bubble burst of, all the housing market challenges that were going on. And I remember being in some situations where budget was there one day for programs that I was working on, then the next day it wasn't there. And, it was a very volatile time working in banking. And I just kind of said, you know what? I had been working with some SaaS vendors on email programs, and an opportunity came up with a recruiter. And I said, I'd rather be on the other side of the table where I feel like I can really help drive decisions. I'm in more control of my own budget. I can help customers make better decisions. And so it led me down a path where I ended up at Cheetah Mail, which was Cheetah Mail slash Experian Cheetah Mail back at that time. And that kind of started me on the business on the vendor side of SaaS.
Very cool. No, I cannot imagine how frustrating it is to get all excited about finally the powers that be approved a budget to a problem that we're looking to address. And all of a sudden, because of things way outside of your control, all of a sudden you're finding out that you don't have that solution. So that must be frustrating.
Yeah, it's when you have a budget and then it's there one day and it's not, it really makes it tough because the day we live in, right, the way programs work, right, your quarter to quarter, month to month focuses and what you're driving to do often change. So back then it was a little more stable, but even, feeling like that lack of control really pushed me to feel like, well, I want to get somewhere where I have more control over what I'm trying to do and what my customers are trying to do.
Makes perfect sense. So tell me a little bit about your current role, your current company, what you do for them, and what a typical day looks like for you, if there
Sure.
is such a thing.
Yeah, we're still an early stage company, so I work for Follows. I am our head of customer success here, so I manage our onboarding team, our customer success support, professional services organization. We really are working to help our customers unlock personalization at scale. And there's a lot of personalization companies out there. Really, what differentiates us is we want to help customers accelerate their buyer pipeline using things like AI, no code platform to really do that. So customers can, build their microsites, help their demand gen and their ABM programs really drive more personalized experience using our AI and our platform to do that for them quickly. And then they can constantly iterate on those programs, add new programs to it to really help drive engagement and scale that engagement quickly.
That's cool. So there's obviously a lot of talk out there in the business development and sales world about leveraging AI to do personalization. I know personalization can take on many forms. There are such things that people think that personalization is simply putting a personalization token in an email, which, we've been doing that for years. So how does Follows define personalization and what makes it unique to other solutions, quote unquote, in the marketplace?
Yeah, if you think about like our generator agents, they're really looking to create and tailor that personalized content within that moment for you. So as you're being driven, let's say from an email program through a Marketo into a specific landing page or microsite, we want to make sure that and all of that content is being tailored for you as an individual shopper, buyer, and then make sure that everything's on brand and controllable. Our AI can manage the content based on what you've seen historically as we identify you, whether it's using a sixth sense, a demand base, or our own identification to ensure that you're seeing the most relevant content real time. And we're helping to drive that and accelerate that engagement, drive you down the pipeline.
Makes sense. So, tell me a little bit about your ideal client profile. What type of industry they're in, how big is the company, and what are the challenges that they need to be facing in order for them to even be open to a conversation with Foros?
I mean, it's a wide range, our profile in that. I mean, we're looking primarily at enterprise and mid-market, business to business SaaS companies who are really looking to enhance their personalization through relevant content. So anybody who's driving a sales organization would use follows potentially, right? In marketing, in sales with their SDRs and their ADRs to really drive better engagement with their customers. So it's a wide group. I mean, we have customers in different verticals. I would say, you know, our goal at the end of the day is really helping them enhance their pipeline through better engagement and drive additional sales. So we work with customers like Akamai or Biotechny and Capgemini, Cisco, ServiceNow, just to name a few.
That's cool. Those are some pretty cool logos. So, the great thing about the fact that you agreed to come onto the show is because you get to see firsthand the difference that you make at a client. So give me a couple of examples of how you found some of your clients. What state were they in? What were their business challenges? What did you do to address those? And kind of what are some of the results of applying your technology? And then after that, we'll get into the best practices on how you were able to deliver that value. So can you give us a couple of examples?
Um, yeah, sure. I mean, typically our customers are looking for a solution to bring their tech stack together. So if you think of, somebody who's using Salesforce and Marketo, they want to integrate those solutions with Follows to better enable their account-based marketing personalization. So they want to, align those signals that they're getting across, all those different platforms and drive through that funnel. So if you think about somebody like a Cisco or a ServiceNow, right, who's driving these very large scale deals, they want to bring those customers in and drive them through that funnel, get them to engage with very specific products, parts of the organization to drive through that pipeline and get them to that next stage in the sales. So whether it's top of funnel, mid funnel, if it's a demand gen program, they're just trying to drive them through. Um, in terms of company examples, let me think of a couple here. Oracle has done some very large scale programs with us and has seen strong results over the years of doing this with us. I guess I'm not going to go into
Of
really
course.
specific details of them, but generally speaking, you're seeing lifts of, you know, engagement from 4 to 5x. You're seeing,
Wow.
ACV increasing dramatically, sometimes 2 to 3 times the ACV through this higher engagement. So Ring Central, for example, they had programs that specifically lifted their click-through engagement and their engagement overall using things like content AI. They can drive 4 to 5 times the engagement. Or just in terms of scaling, the number of accounts you can cover, somebody like ServiceNow can go from, covering tens to covering thousands of accounts. So you can do more one-to-one, one-to-many, one-to-few programs and really reduce the cost. That's the other thing that's worth talking about. All of these companies are reducing their costs and their time to market. So efficiency is a big thing. When you're a large organization and you can execute at a high level, personalized landing pages where you're having a single template that can target lots of different audiences in a one-to-one fashion. But you can also build that page using something like Gen AI and Content AI in hours, maybe a day, versus weeks and months with your own dev team. It brings in significant value.
Makes perfect sense. Before we go any further and talking about how to ensure a successful implementation, because I've always heard it's not just the tool, it's not just the driver. In other words, the one implementing it, it's a combination of the two that makes a successful engagement. So before we get into that, if somebody wants to learn more about Follows, what is, how can they do that? What's the website? What's the best way for them to find out more information about Follows?
Yeah, if you can go directly to the website www.follows.com, right? And we have plenty up there. We drink our own Kool-Aid. So, as you're looking at and engaging with Follows, you'll end up on quite a few boards that we've created based on what we know about you as a potential customer. So, if you're an account that's somebody that we have been targeting historically and marketing to, you'll see more personalized content as you come through and look at our website. So that's the place to start. It's the easiest. Obviously we have outreach by our sales team. We'll have standard follow-ups, whether it's, email. We do a lot of ad generation, but you can go directly to follows.com and learn more.
Brett,
We're actually doing some updates in the coming weeks. We'll have a lot more released about our AI and how our customers and how we're making AI and ChatGPT available through our generative AI and personalized AI agents.
Awesome. And just for those watching, the way Follows is spelled is Folloze. So it's Folloze.com. So let's go back to what I was saying earlier, which is, you know, implementing the software without the right intellectual property and experience to configure that platform. You can have the greatest tool in the world, but if it's not configured well, it doesn't matter. I remember in my Accenture days, I heard about SAP implementations that were multi-$100 million implementations that went south. And then you had others that went extremely well and had everything to do with the implementation, the processes, and the team. So as you're working with clients to deliver them that success and that value that they paid for, what are some of the best practices you find to ensure a successful implementation?
Yeah. I mean, one is understanding every client is coming in with their own baggage, or every new client is coming in with their own baggage and their own goals and areas of focus. So early in the engagement, typically I like to do a pre kind of kickoff call with the client as sales brings in that customer, and there's been a lot of conversations at that point. You want to level set the expectations early, understand. You also want to empower the team early on our side to understand what that client's looking for. So those pre-kickoff meetings tend to be really valuable as a way to go through, kind of high level, define what they're focused on, keep it to a small team in that conversation to really narrow down, okay, what's the most important things? What do you value? What are you trying to accomplish in this? What are your key KPIs? And then also set the expectation to what happens during the onboarding. I think that's one thing that really goes a long way. And then building off that, expectation setting is really important. What does an onboarding look like? What's the time frame that the customer wants to see value delivered? You know, in this day and age, right, a lot of contracts are 1 year contracts initially. And so time to value is absolutely critical. So getting on the same page early and understanding, do you have programs that need to go live in 30 days, right? Is the expectation that we're live and up and running with some demand gen, ABM, some event programs in 30 days? Great. We want to establish that and know that and put a time frame around it. So no longer is it, hey, we've got 8 weeks of onboarding meetings. No, we have we have stages to onboarding and implementation. These stages can run in parallel. And so what we want to do is clearly define who needs to be involved in what stage and what conversation. So for instance, we do a one pager in our kickoff with customers that we share, and there's in a standard implementation, there's 8 stages. And within that, there's enablement content, there's technical content, and there's more strategic content. Well, we highlight it on that page. We do a green, blue, and red, I think, just highlighting, hey, this is the category. If it's technical, we're covering SSO, we're covering an API setup, and we're covering Marketo. We want the customer to know who to bring to the call. Understand that those move much better if they have a clear understanding of who should be involved. We have a clear, and we're both following that. We can accelerate that things much quicker that way. Also, it allows them to know there's a lot of self-service content that we have available, right? If they're setting up an API integration, whether Marketo set up Salesforce, all these are pretty standardized, right? And then knowing, okay, that's typically a stage two, but because things can run in parallel, we can get our guys working on that today. We know we need our technical folks tied to those particular, maybe it's a 6sense integration. We have a 6sense person, so we want to bring that person in. We have a sales person, we have a network person. There's a lot of people typically involved. So you want to really call those things out, put it in the hands early because a lot of things can happen in parallel.
What a great answer. What are some of the leading indicators that you see that typically lead to uh, kind of the wheels coming off the train, in other words? And
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I was at Accenture, there were certain clients that no matter how many times I communicated expectations. They just didn't want to hear my answer because they didn't like my answer. And obviously we want our clients to like our answer, but sometimes there are certain things if we wanted to get it done the right way. So that was a huge red flag to me. I was like, hey, we've got an issue here because they continue to expect something that we just are not capable to deliver within the time frame. So what are some of the red flags you see, Troy, and how do you mitigate some of that risk?
Yeah, there's a few. Um, One is lack of organizational alignment. So, it's really typical for us to say you want C-level involved. When you're trying to sell, you want C-level, they're making the decision. But one of the earlier signs of failure is when C-level buys something but hasn't trickled down what they bought to the
Mm,
to the team, right? And so users are very different than C-level. And so if you don't have everybody kind of on the same page early, then what typically happens is a lot of delays, a lot of reselling, a lot of enablement, kind of demoing conversations. And so that 1 year gets condensed dramatically because now you're trying to convince everybody and teach everybody what they bought. And they're backtracking internally saying, hey, did we really want this? What did we want? So they're having to do that. Then they're listening, right? And so it just delays things dramatically. Another area that always throws up a red flag to me is when we have delays in setting a meeting because we can't
mm.
get a technical resource on a call. Probably one of the biggest problems with any kind of implementation is X person is the only one who can do it and they're not available, or they're the person assigned and they're not available. And all of a sudden, 2 weeks becomes 3 weeks, becomes 4 weeks, and they were out for this reason and there's no backup. With enterprise orgs, that's usually less of a challenge. Usually, where we see that as a challenge, enterprises, just because they're so big that our buyer maybe doesn't know who to get to. And so they're just having a challenge finding that right person. So, early alignment internally within an org, and this question comes up all the time when I'm talking to other senior execs and they ask me what derails. I'm like, hey, listen, if you can align people internally and know who's working on the project from a technical standpoint, from a marketing standpoint, from a day-to-day user, get that alignment early. We're going to catapult things. We're really going to be able to jump forward. So those are two of the biggest things. There's lots of little things along the way that can derail. I will lead that into how do you get back on track? And I will say the one of the biggest ways to get back on track when you're seeing that is bringing people together and really outlining what needs to be done and who needs to do it and offering to help. In some cases, if we can accelerate that process with an outline of exactly what needs to be done in a deeper detail and offer to get on a call and handhold somebody, I'm very willing to do that. you can't make up for a poor onboarding in my mind. That just stays with you forever. So going above and beyond in onboarding, even if it means more hand holding, is critically important.
I could not agree more. So here's another question. I know that, part of the mark of a good leader and good manager is to coach and teach your team to do what you can do. So how much of that is something that you think a leader like you should be doing versus empowering your team to do the same thing so that they're also aware of those big risks and those red flags and how to address them? How important is that?
It's a balancing act. So to some extent, right, there are times you're going to jump in and you need to help push things and demonstrate it through them seeing you do it, right? And then there's the other side of it. You need to let them do it. So having regular onboarding and implementations meetings with your team, making sure that you're doing postmortems to talk about it so they're learning from those challenges, sometimes mistakes. Like, we're not perfect, right? There are times we mess something up during the implementation process. What you want to do is take that away, have that review, make sure the team understands and learns from it, because you can't be everywhere. I can't be everywhere. And so I need to make sure that they're evolving constantly and developing, which is why you sometimes have to sit back and see how things play out. I mean, look, every situation is a learning and development situation, whether it goes successfully or goes poorly in the right, management scenario, right? And my teams over the years, I find people learn better oftentimes with those little issues, but it's also how they react to those issues. So it's, yes, you can make a mistake. Yes, you can learn from it, but also how do you then push into it? And so one of the things I really focus on when developing people is, look, your customers are going to judge you by how you handle adversity and problems. So don't run from it. Just embrace it. It's if you've ever read the book Embrace the Suck, right?
Yep.
Um, embrace it, right? Push into it, admit the mistake, figure out the solution, present the solution, work hard to implement that. Hope it doesn't impact your customer too much, but understand it may, and you may need to make up for that a little bit, but be willing to do those things. And people learn tremendously from those scenarios. So I think as a younger manager, I probably just had a habit of pushing in and doing. And then you kind of learn from that, right? And you say, okay, this isn't going to work all the time. I got to figure out how to let them learn from those mistakes, and how do you evaluate and learn afterwards.
Yeah, and I think, look, in professional services, because that's what implementations are, is professional services. You're relying on people, and people do make mistakes, and you're right. There have been so many situations that I've been in that it's like, and I've coached my team on this too. It's like, guys, the best thing you can do in this situation is admit your mistake, and then tell them what you're going to do to fix it, and what the time frame is for fixing it. And what's crazy is, as uncomfortable as it is for a client to be unhappy with you, I also find that if both the professional and the client are willing to push through that and come to a good resolution, the amount of trust goes up significantly. Do you find that to be the case as well, Troy?
Yeah, 100%. Pushing through adversity as a partnership, and even early on, right? I said earlier, those initial implementations, onboarding, that's how you really gain a lot of the trust. And it's often handling the adversity, whether it's on the customer side or on our side, and working through that together. You build that trust together, right? Um, that history starts to be built, because you don't build history overnight,
Right.
but that's a lot of the heavy lifting, and a lot of the history gets established there, and then you kind of carry that forward. And one other challenging area with implementations that I didn't mention earlier, but is a big challenge in today's market, right, these last few years, is change management. Um, we have we have been in a kind of an unprecedented 3-year stretch here of orgs, org changes, org layoffs, etc. And that has hit quite frequently during implementations of customers, whether it was here at Follows, whether it was in my last organization, or even prior to that. But it's been so frequent that you really have to have a plan during implementation and onboarding if that does happen, because it's not happening once every 100. It's oftentimes once every 4, 5, 6. There's some major change that happens with a customer. So being able to be there for your customers as they're going through those changes, offering added assistance, added help, redoing meetings often, and that willingness to kind of re-go over, reshare, have the same discussion with a new person, that helps build cachet with that new team member or entire team. And it's really important right now that, we don't look at that as a negative, but really kind of embrace it and say, all right, embrace the suck.
Yeah.
Well, you do have to backtrack, but understand, let's reevaluate what is this new team's values. Are they the same? Did the org goals and KPIs change? Did their value, what they're trying to get out of us, change? Let's reassess that, and then let's restart this process at this stage and make sure we're getting them ramped up. So that's a big challenge today that, I would say was less frequent 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah. And I also think sometimes this has been my experience and our clients' experience is that oftentimes people's tolerance for mistakes go down. And at the first sign of trouble, they want to, oh, this isn't going to work and all this kind of stuff. How do you manage and mitigate that? Because, like I said, we're humans and professional services are depending on humans. I know that AI is going a long way to help reduce the risk of that, of those human mistakes. But, not even AI is perfect, as you will know, Troy. It's good, don't get me wrong, but it's not perfect. So, if you're going to find yourself in a client situation to where a mistake was made and they want to pull the plug, kind of, before you even have a chance to fix it, how would you advise somebody handle that?
Yeah, I'm going to reference another book, right? Start with the why,
Right.
right? There's always a reason that something happened, and sometimes it's not a good reason, right? It could just
Mhm.
be human error. Sometimes it's technical, but oftentimes people can't move forward without that original question being answered. And so people are quick to cut. This is it. I'm not doing anything. We're not proceeding. But if you can have that kind of step back conversation, here's what happened. Here's how we got here. Here's how I propose we move forward. Oftentimes that gets you back to that point of a willingness to move forward and kind of, all right, let's start with a clean slate. I understood. I Resolution is also important, right? It's not just starting with the why. Did we solve the problem, or do we have a solution? Here's how we're going to solve it, and then proceed forward. That tends to pull people back in more often than not. What you don't want to do is make a bunch of excuses, try
Yeah.
and force things forward. That just doesn't work, and that's where I say accountability, ownership, responsibility is really critical. And we talk about development. That's always something from a development standpoint. I point my team. A lot of CS people, part of why the job is so hard is it's so focused on taking responsibility for situations. And professional services, as a part of that, is the same way, right? Even sometimes it's not our fault. You explain the why, but you take responsibility of owning that and pushing it forward and getting to the root cause and moving it forward. That helps because it does feel to the customer like I've got an explanation. We can move forward. I can move forward. And sometimes, behind the scenes, they're probably saying, yeah, I caused this,
Right. Right.
by spelling it out. I'm not pointing the finger. I'm just spelling out details of how we got here. And they kind of accept that and move forward.
And a lot of times I've seen people take responsibility for something, specifically a supplier or a service provider take responsibility for something that they did not do, but it makes it not only it solidifies a relationship with the client or the customer, but it also gives the client, hey, this person's got my back. This was clearly my mistake. I didn't get him the information he or she needed to move this implementation forward in a timely fashion. As a matter of fact, he followed up with me daily for a month, and I just got it to him. But he just got on a call with my superiors and found out, and he took 100% of the responsibility.
Yeah.
Um, and you want to turn somebody that might seem as your adversary into a huge advocate. I think one of the core values that are missing in this day and age is kindness. And it's amazing how well that goes. Just to say, look, I'm going to throw myself on the bus temporarily for the greater good. to make this person look good so that we can deliver the value to the client.
Yeah. I remember years ago, a couple of my team members kept saying I was like the client whisperer. I'd get on a call and things would calm down. And I always found it funny because I would say, I'm really not doing that. All I'm doing is getting on a call and accepting responsibility for something so we can move forward. And
Exactly.
it was really often as simple as that, where it was like, we're going to stop pointing the finger. It's my fault. I own it, right? I managed the team. Didn't matter if it was my team, didn't matter if it was the customer, but I'm just going to own this because I want to proceed forward. We're going to figure out the why, but I'm taking ownership of it.
Yeah.
And it just makes it so much easier. And like you said, there's a lot of personalities often involved in this, and it often does create a trust and build the relationship, that willingness. Because the next time something happens, I've had customers say that's on us, right? Because you said it was on us three other times and they know it really wasn't. They're gonna take this one for you.
Right. Correct. Correct. Cool. Well, Troy, this has been extremely helpful. Thank you so much for your time today. Are there any other topics about a successful implementation of a SaaS, or quite frankly, any other software product or solution out there that you would like to discuss before we close that you think is important?
I would kind of leave with this message. I mean, implementations, onboardings are a partnership effort, right? When both sides, us as a business and you as a customer, are going through this, if you're working it together as a partnership, not a vendor, a me you relationship, it's so much more successful. And that trust really gets built. And I think that's what I'm always trying to do, is drive it as a partnership, a collaboration. We have a schedule, we have an agenda, we have things checking the box that everybody's doing. But at the end of the day, if there's a problem, let's all get on a quick conversation. Let's figure it out. Let's get to the source of it. Let's move it forward. Sometimes we get caught up in Slacks and emails, and there's things get blown out of proportion when there's some little thing that could be solved just by having a conversation. So encourage you to do that. And then from a platform perspective, check out Follows. I think we can help you to engage. We can help you to be more efficient with how you're building your landing pages, microsites, running your demand gen and ABM programs. Our AI is really helpful in driving that efficiency and getting programs up and running very quickly.
Yeah. And Troy, I also, every time I have a conversation with a colleague or a professional that does what you do, it's always interesting to me the one subject that never comes up about an implementation going south, which is, well, just the technology is out of date. It always comes down to communication, how you treat people, the partnership, how you mitigate risk, how you handle conflict, how you handle mistakes, because one of the things we tell our clients is even though we're really good at what we do, we're going to have issues. We're going to have obstacles. And, instead of blasting out a nasty email, let's have a 10, 15-minute call. I mean, I answer my phone at 11 o'clock at night. I'm sure you do too, because it's a relationship. And like you said, it's a partnership. And if you succeed, I succeed. So that's the funniest thing, is that so many technologists get so focused on the technology, which is necessary. But what people really value more than anything is, what is the client experience throughout this engagement? So, Troy,
Yeah,
thank you so much. Yeah.
Yeah, there's no technology that's perfect. And I'll leave you with one small story. I remember years ago, a customer of mine had gone to a different company, and it was our third company over a course of probably 5 or 6 years. And I had the business from the first company, the second company, and we were in pitching the third company. And her reason for choosing is she said, Troy is the devil I know. I'd rather know Troy and what I'm facing than the one I don't know. And we had hiccups over the years, but we had always worked together to solve them. And I took it as a compliment. I'd rather be the devil you know, because nothing is perfect.
No, I think that is a huge compliment, because, like you said earlier, it's that if you truly care about a successful client outcome, you'll and your concern is about delivering a great experience, then a lot of that stuff that I think just gets really discombobulated, trying to protect your ego or your pride or your political capital. It's kind of funny how life sometimes is. If you give all that up, it comes back to you in spades. So, Troy, thank you for joining us today. Great
Thanks,
insight,
Paul.
great information. I appreciate it. Once again, the name of his company is follows, and you can reach their company at FOLLOZE.com. Troy, thank you so much for joining us today, man. It was an absolute pleasure.
Thanks, Charles.